Next, from the state capitol, we talk with Clarke Maisch of the NFIB of Illinois as she talks about the impact a rise in the minimum wage would have on small businesses. This runs about 10 minutes.
Clarke Maisch with the NFIB. Thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. And as we are here in February at the state capitol, the state budget has been pushed aside until after the primary in later March. Well, you're here and you're talking to lawmakers. What are some of the issues that are of concern to small business owners?
Sure. Well, it's been an active season so far, given that we've only been in session a few weeks. But there are a couple of issues that we're lobbying. Number one, of course, is the minimum wage increase. There's proposals out there to raise Illinois' minimum wage to $10.65 over the next 3 years. My membership, small business owners across the state of Illinois, are adamantly opposed to that. Illinois continues to be one of the highest states for unemployment. I think we're ranking third highest in the country. We're also one of the highest costs of doing business states. It's expensive to be a business owner in the state of Illinois, and to raise our wage to $10.65 would make it even harder.
What specifically kind of feedback have you had any specific feedback from business owners who would say how that would impact their operations?
Sure. Well, most small business owners have said there are only so many dollars to use for labor costs. Of course, they have money they have to spend on capital projects, for product, for transportation. And so when government steps in and artificially sets a wage rate, something has to give. And so most small business owners will look at decreasing hours worked, maybe working a little more themselves, closing their doors, which of course is the worst option. And in some cases, particularly in border communities, they can move across the border. Illinois has a minimum wage right now of $8.25. We're an entire dollar higher than most of our surrounding states. So it really is a competition issue.
And what do you say to people like the governor who would make the case, well, it's hard to get by on minimum wage?
I would say that the minimum wage was never meant to raise a family of four or raise a family at all. A minimum wage is the bottom wage that many high schoolers and colleges, in fact, the vast majority of people making minimum wage are high school kids and college kids. That first job where they learn how to show up on time and have good manners and dress appropriately. We would argue that perhaps Governor Quinn's time would be better spent making Illinois a better place to do business so that we can draw manufacturing jobs and other types of industries back to the state of Illinois and make us a better state to do business in. And hopefully with that would bring higher paying jobs.
Any other issues as we are early in the process but that are bubbling up of concern to small businessmen?
Sure. We have another issue that we're working which would mandate employers with more than 10 employees to set up automatic IRA accounts for all their workers, both part-time and full-time. We have a problem with that, first of all, because the state of Illinois would administer that retirement program, and the state doesn't have a very good track record when it comes to handling pension dollars or, for that matter, college saving dollars. And so that's an issue that our members are adamantly opposed to, and our ballot on that question, 95% of our members said they are opposed. If a business owner or, for that matter, an individual wants to set up a retirement account, there are many, many opportunities for them in the private sector to do so. We just don't think government should get involved.
Not as a mandate, you're saying?
Correct.
Do you know, how many businesses actually have some kind of a voluntary retirement system when they set up, or have you not polled your?
We have not. I think the statistics say that about 40% of businesses do not currently have a retirement option for their workers. And to that we would say, let's work with the state should be working with the private sector, the financial advisors, the small business owners, to educate folks on the fact that setting up retirement accounts do make sense. It does make sense in terms of saving for their future. But we just, again, don't think government should step in and start mandating employers to do this. Or perhaps the state should do a study like the state of California is doing right now. Let's find out what we can do to help facilitate small business owners and their employees in terms of retirement.
And let me use that as a transition point. We have talked just now about two things that you don't want to have happen. Is there anything you're pushing for that would increase employment in the state, or at least make it easier to do business?
Sure. Well, of course, Speaker Madigan came out talking about reducing the corporate income tax in Illinois. We certainly favor that, but we also said to the Speaker, don't forget about small business owners. Small business owners, the vast majority, something like 75%, actually pay the personal income tax. They don't pay the corporate income tax because of how they're structured. So we would certainly urge lawmakers to take a look at that, because of course, as we reduce taxes, the idea that there will be more economic activity and opportunity in Illinois certainly would bode well for creating jobs. We also are looking to legislators and the governor to reduce some regulations. We've got to get government off the back of small business owners if we want them to create jobs.
How much of an issue is it, speaking of regulation, that every time there's some regulation, as a small business owner, you have to comply with the regulation? Right. There's paperwork. To what extent is that administrative burden an issue with your members?
It's huge, because my members don't have an entire floor filled with lawyers or HR experts. Most small business owners many times are doing their own payroll. They're certainly trying to figure out how to comply with all the rules and the laws and the regulations in the state. So it is difficult. And so we, as both at the state and federal level, we continue to see the agencies acting on their own or by executive order, sort of piling on when it comes to telling business owners how to do things. And while we certainly understand certain regulations for safety are certainly important, some of this stuff is just becoming too extreme and making it difficult for small business owners to comply. And of course, if they don't comply, they don't get told how to remedy it. They get hit with a fine or a penalty, and that's money out of their pockets and money they can't use to hire people.
Let's just talk, for those who don't know, what is NFIB and how many members are there in the state of Illinois?
Sure. The NFIB, we're the largest small business advocacy organization in the state of Illinois. We have about 11,000 members in Illinois, but we're also a national organization. We represent about 350,000 small business owners across America. We lobby in every state capital and in Washington, D.C.
And you're nonpartisan, I guess. You have members that support you on both sides of the aisles and probably those who oppose you on both sides.
Correct. We like to say we support those who support us. And so we do a voting record every 2 years, and our members know, where they're elected officials, how they're voting on issues of importance to them.
Just before we let you go, as we go into this election year, Illinois has been struggling for years with its economy. What kind of an environment is it right now for small business, and has it improved over the last 5 years at all, or is it getting worse? How would you assess the current environment for small business in Illinois?
I think it's improved a tiny bit, but really there was only one place to go, and that was up after the Great Recession. I think that what's probably concerning are groups like Moody's Analytics last year said that Illinois is one of the few states that is very close to falling back into a recession, depending on what goes on in the state capitol and what the governor does. And so that's why it's troubling when we have Governor Quinn talking about a minimum wage increase and a paid sick leave mandate. These types of things that just add to the burden for small business owners, because small business owners are the top job creator, not only in the state of Illinois, but in the country. We need to be looking at ways to make it easier to do business, easier to succeed in the state if we're ever going to climb out of this hole.
And just one last thing, when we say small business, some people might think that's a mom and pop, and that would be small business. How large is where do we move from being a small business to a larger business? What's your kind of definition of small business?
Well, I will tell you that the SBA, the Small Business Administration in Washington, characterizes a small business as fewer than 500 employees. We don't agree with that necessarily. We often use the rule of thumb of 50 or fewer employees is really the small business, primarily because 50 seems to be a magic number when it comes to federal and state law. Oftentimes that's a threshold that triggers more mandates. For instance, the Family Medical Leave Act gets triggered if you have more than 50 employees. So we say if you're under 50, you're considered a small business.
And so probably if any of us look at what we do, whether we buy gasoline or go to the dry cleaners or any number of the butcher things that we would do to provide products and services for ourselves, we're probably using a lot of your members as
we hope so.
supplying goods and services to us.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you again for joining us.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.